side investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.
Back to Angel City PD, may I see your stats?
You're not really human anymore, are you?
Just remember, in order to get there, we actually have to get there. What does katana mean? It means Japanese sword.
There's a storm coming. A storm of the likes that you have never seen before.
Tell me again how it feels when you get with my friend.
Is sick and tired of dressing up like a whore and working on these two-bit cases.
Heroes, the Earth people are getting closer to that which we fear.
Hi everyone. So it's been a little bit since I've been behind the mic for the podcast. I've had a very eventful past couple weeks. Life has happened, but I'm hoping that for next season I'll be able to be posting more regularly. But just to be frank, I've just had a hell of a past couple of days. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about movies. And before I get into today's two movies, I want to, of course, get into B-movie news. One of my favorite announcements from last month was that The Asylum, one of my favorite production companies, is releasing a new movie, and it came out March 23rd. It is called Ape versus Mecha Ape, which I believe is a sequel to Ape versus Monster, which of course was a mockbuster of Godzilla versus Kong. So be sure to check that out. But one movie that I want to give a shout out to is The Last Kumite, which is currently in its last stretch for its Kickstarter. I believe that there is 10 days left for The Last Kumite. If you're interested in supporting a martial arts film that is in the same vein of classic 80s and 90s martial arts, the film will involve such stars as Cynthia Rothrock, Matthias Hughes, Michael Quiss, Kurt McKinney, Richard Norton, Billy Blanks, Abdel Kissi, David Jung, the son of Bolo Young, and many, many more. So be sure to check out their Kickstarter and support them. Very excited to see how that turns out. I, of course, put my dollar on it, so obviously I think that the end product is worthwhile. We don't get many action movies like Bloodsport, Kickboxer, or TC 2000 anymore. I'm hoping to see a resurgence. I think with the comic book fatigue starting to set in and Hollywood sort of struggling as far as just doing remakes of classic animated movies, I think that eventually there is going to be a void. What's old is new again. I mean, with something like Stranger Things, the 80s came back. So who knows? Maybe classic action movies will come back. I mean, in a way, John Wick sort of has started that whole thing where, the plot might be thin, but the stunts and actions are incredible because of the talent behind it. And speaking of fun movies with incredible action, which I wish that I could say about Nemesis 4, because I was very much looking forward to it with the promise that the ending of Nemesis 3 had. But Nemesis 4 was released in 1996. It was directed by Albert Punier and written by Albert Punier. It stars Sue Price, reprising her role as Alex Sinclair. And if you recall, Nemesis 3 ended with the promise of her going to the future and kicking ass and getting revenge for the murder of her sisters. Like the last shot in the film was her all armed and ready. So I was ready for her to take on a bunch of cyborgs. But this film is more philosophical than anything else. I'm sad to say. And unfortunately, as much as I love Punier's action direction and stunt direction, that is where he is strongest. Writing, not so much. Like, as far as like the weakness of Nemesis 3 and 1 was the dialogue. And Nemesis 1 made up for it because there was enough action to break it up, and then Nemesis 3 had a lot of slog. Nemesis 4 is by far the worst so far. So what do we get instead of this badass war with the cyborgs? So as usual, these movies start off with a paragraph of explanation that the war with the cyborgs is over and that there is a sort of ceasefire, if you will. And Alex was involved with that war. So now she's living as a bounty hunter. And she is taking one last job from her boss. And she begins to see this angel of death while she is on this job. And while on this job, she kills this guy, and there's sort of a discrepancy on whether or not she killed the right person. And then eventually her partner, who has belly button sex with her first, like weird cyborg belly button sex, like a protrusion comes out of this guy where it looks like a metal probe goes into her belly button. I'm convinced that Tommy Wiseau saw this movie and thought, okay, well, I guess that's how people have sex. People put things into belly buttons, I guess. But the sex scene is so bizarre and weird, and then her partner betrays her, and she ends up having to kill him. And Sue Price looks great in the movie, and for the very, very, very few action scenes that are in the film, she gets to shine. But I mean, as far as like her body work, for how in shape she was for her bodybuilding, I mean, damn, she was in shape. And there's a lot of scenes where you get to see quite a bit of her, to put it delicately. Like there's an entire scene where she's talking to a guy and she's completely naked. But watching the interviews for this film, Punier was talking about wanting to represent the disconnect between machines and humans. And I mean, I get wanting to do that, but there's not enough action to break down the monotony. And I think what happened was they blew most of the budget on Nemesis 2. Like, I think they had an idea for this trilogy, and most of the stunts and the action was wasted. Well, not wasted, but it was used for Nemesis 2. Like, Nemesis 2 was a blast to watch. But 3 and 4 definitely suffered from too much story and not enough action. Which is what I was excited about after watching Nemesis 1 and 2. So she finds herself on the run, and it turns out that somehow the woman in black, this angel that has been following her, sort of cloaked, is somehow related to the person that she accidentally killed. It makes very little sense. She has a couple people from her past come to try to help her out. It's a lot of her sitting around in abandoned buildings and just kind of talking to herself. It's extremely boring. There's a helicopter chase that ends way too quickly. It's like when that happened, I got perked up. I was like, holy shit, we're getting an action scene after all this talking. But eventually she finds out that her boss kind of set her up, and thanks to her friends, she's able to sort of clear her name, and she eventually goes into hiding. And that's pretty much where the film ends. I don't have a lot to talk about because nothing really happened in this movie. Like, I wish I had a proper breakdown for Nemesis 4, but there just isn't. And it concerns me for Nemesis 5. Like, is that going to be even worse? Like, I'd rather, for Nemesis 5, my hope is, even if the special effects are dog shit, at least I want to be entertained. I know that there is a new director for Nemesis 5. And of course, we'll discuss that once we get to that next episode. But overall, Nemesis 4, I can't really recommend it like at all. I mean, the Blu-ray transfer is beautiful and all that. And Sue Price does the best with what she has. And she's gorgeous, of course. But just on its own, I mean, the only part that I really enjoyed was maybe the opening 5 minutes after the opening crawl that sort of explains away the war between the cyborg and the humans, which would have been great to see. That's what this movie should have been about, but maybe again they just didn't have the budget to do it, and it's a real shame. I'm hoping that even if Nemesis 5 has a lower budget, I'm just hoping that I'm entertained by silly, mindless action. Because I think these movies are at its weakest when it's trying to be philosophical. And I hate to be mean, but it's just, that's not what these movies are good at. I felt like in Nemesis 1 and 2, Punier at least understood that his strength was in the action and the stunts, and that you could occasionally break those up with some story. But once you got to like 20 or 30 minutes of the main character just talking to themselves in an abandoned building, you've kind of lost me. But a film series that has been way more consistent for me has been the Trancers series. The first 3 are all very, very entertaining. So what about Trancers 4? Trancers 4, aka Jack of Swords, was released in 1994. It once again stars Tim Thomerson as Jack Death. Helen Hunt did not return for this one, although, I mean, from interviews I saw with her reflecting on the series, it seemed like she might have, because she enjoyed very much working with the crew. But, I mean, you got Tim Thomerson back, and that is the most important part. And Trancers 4 is directed by David Nutter and is written by Peter David. It is, of course, distributed by Full Moon Pictures. So, following his adventures throughout Los Angeles, he's returned to his own time, and he is, of course, out a wife again. Like he originally got back with his first wife at the end of Trancers 3, and he had a new partner through the shark android. And probably what happened was, like, they came around from Trancers 4 and were like, we can't afford the android again. So he basically comes back after a mission with just the android's head, and unfortunately Shark is dead. But now that he no longer has a wife, he basically just all has work. So he's kind of just in the same spot he was at the beginning of Trancers 1. So they find evidence or something that there is some sort of time wibbly wobbly stuff going on. So they put him in a time portal, and unfortunately a Soylenoid from his previous assignment attacks him, and it's some sort of creature. I don't know what a Soylenoid is. It's not related to the Trancers, and he finds himself back in medieval Europe. And I love time travel movies, especially like low budget one that goes back to medieval Europe. Army of Darkness is one of my favorite movies. And of course, seeing a grizzled detective from the 23rd century that acts like a mix of Clint Eastwood and Richard Deckard from Blade Runner is extremely entertaining. I will say, as far as like the supporting cast, God bless them, they really try, but they're not quite on par with the supporting cast of the first 3 films, which makes it funnier in a lot of ways. So unfortunately, when in the past, he figures out that the Trancers have sort of taken over and are basically the noble class in this kingdom. He finds this poor woman that is in the process of being eaten or drained, if you will, by a Trancer. So of course he jumps in, and unfortunately the technology of his time is either damaged in some way by his travels or whatever. So the Trancer gives him a lot more difficulty than he would have expected. So he eventually gets the upper hand, but he's badly injured, and one of the individuals that picks him up sort of nurses him back to health. But there's a catch, because this guy also betrays him, which is hilarious. And eventually the Trancers, along with the King Trancer, shows up, and this guy's named Lord Caliban. They show up, and Jack tries to activate his watch, but the watch doesn't work quite all that well because it's damaged, like his guns and everything. So his 10-second like slow-mo thing works sort of, but it slows him down too. So the Trancers are like, what the hell is he doing? Why is he moving in slow motion? So they eventually just knock him out and take him back to the castle, where they start to torture him. And but there's a twist. Once he's at the castle, he finds sort of an uneasy ally in Caliban's son, who is also a Trancer that hasn't eaten anybody yet, but he's beginning to transform and become more like his father. So with the resistance, who goes by the name of the Tunnel Rats, break into the castle and break Jack Death out, because there's some sort of prophecy, very Armored Darkness, where there's this chosen one that will come from the sky and will point his gun up in the sky, and he'll get struck by lightning and everybody will be saved. Sounds ridiculous, and I love it. So they break Jack Death out with the help of Lord Caliban's son, and I like the twist of there being a Trancer who is trying to fight against their nature. I think that is a welcomed part to the series. So eventually they break out, and they're trying to come up with a plan of attack to resist the noble Trancers, and all the while the Lord Caliban's son is sort of trying to resist, and he falls in love with one of the Tunnel Rats, and she sort of offers himself to her, and he sort of drains her a little bit to satiate the hunger. But eventually Lord Caliban does find the Tunnel Rats along with Jack Death, and Jack Death has one of my favorite lines in the movie where he says, "Unguard, motherfucker." He draws a sword and does a really goofy pose. I love Tim Thomerson as his character so much. So there is a battle at the end between the Tunnel Rats and the Trancers. A lot of sword fighting, and eventually Jack Death finds himself on this hill, like in the painting of him, and he points his gun up to the sky because he's like, what the hell, what do I have to lose? So the lightning bolt hits his gun and creates some sort of paradox that apparently destroys Caliban. However, that's not all, because Caliban becomes like this disembodied voice, and that's kind of where the movie ends. Like, I don't know, does he become a god or something? And I don't know. The ending was very crazy. But it leaves it on a cliffhanger for Trancers 5, which I'm excited to watch, because again, I went into this season expecting to like the Nemesis movies more, but the Trancers movies have been extremely entertaining. Like, they've been entertaining up to number 4. Like, I still, even though I don't think number 4 is as good of quality as the first 3, and I use the term quality with an asterisk. I think the first 3 are extremely well made and entertaining B movies, and I think Trancers 4 is obviously a bit more silly than the first 3, but still extremely entertaining. Jack Death as a main character is incredible to watch. Very fun, classic, grizzled hero, And I'm excited to watch the next two, Trancers 5 and 6. I mean, sign me up. I think Nemesis 5, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic. I mean, I was so pumped after the end of Nemesis 3 to watch Nemesis 4, because I was like, okay, we're going to get this huge battle where the special effects be great or whatever. At least the stunt work will be nice. But the thing is, Nemesis 4 didn't deliver. Trancers 4 is fun, and you can kind of watch it without seeing the first three. I mean, it helps to see the first three to understand where Jack Death's point of view comes from, but I still think the series is extremely entertaining. I think that if you were to marathon the first four together over a weekend, you'd have a lot of fun with it. And Tim Thomerson, I love as the character, and I'm very excited to visit Trancers 5 in the coming episode. So that is it for now for B Movie Binge. Again, I apologize for being away for so long. But again, life happens, and I'm just very excited to finish this season and then to jump into season 2. I think that this podcast for me has been something really fun, and I'm excited to really get into it. So take care and have a blessed day.